Well, good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Quamel Arroyo, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Accessibility Officer here for the MTA. I want to give a special thank you to Edith's family, for the Prentice family who are here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we honor a beloved friend, a mentor, an advocate, and founding member of the MTA's Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility. Edith Prentice was a powerhouse voice for persons with disabilities, and for the last 25 years of her life, she was a tireless leader in the fight to ensure equity and accessibility in New York City and in our transit systems throughout the state. We all miss her greatly since her passing this March. To me, she was a dear friend and mentor. It is truly because of her that I am here today. Quite literally, she wrote a letter of recommendation for me to have this job. But even before the MTA, Edith and I spent vast hours discussing the change that has yet to become a reality for so many New Yorkers with disabilities as we navigate our transit system. We celebrated all of our wins, but never without planning for the next battle or strategy to help others understand where their expertise ended and the lived experiences of so many others started. It is our hope that in the memorial plaque that we'll be unveiling today will serve as a daily reminder to the thousands of riders who use this station every day, one of Edith's home stations, that we all have the power to be a voice for change. Through her work with ACTA, the Transit Riders Council, and Community Board 12, Edith left a legacy that touched the millions of New Yorkers. When you see a new elevator opening or a platform gap closed or an accessible art in our system, know that Edith Prentice helped make it happen. We are so happy to remember her today, and I thank our community partners for coming, particularly Commissioner Khaleesi, Borough President Gail Brewer, Council members Idanis Rodriguez and Helen Rosenthal, and Jessica Murray for ACTA, and a special shout out to representatives from Community Board 12, which Edith was a longtime member of. Thank you all so much for being here. Next we'll hear from an MTA board member, Andrew Albert.
Thank you. Thank you. When I heard that Edith had left us, I was in shock. It had not been that long since I had seen her at one of our Transit Rider Council meetings. She was her usual ebullient self, a tireless fighter for accessibility, a great advocate for people with disabilities, and I was in total shock. She had been a member of ours since 2007, and all of a sudden, she was not a member anymore. But we learned a lot from her. And Edith brought to our attention things that the average rider of the trains would not even think of, such as the gap between the platform and the train itself, and the placement of doors on the platform relative to the humps that were put on for wheelchair users. And what if there were more than one equipment type, car type, serving that station? Would the humps then still line up with the doors? These are things that we don't even think about, but obviously people need to think about to make our system accessible. Then there's the issue of the GOs, the service disruptions that happen on nights and weekends. Edith was a tireless fighter for having signs telling you where the next accessible route is if your normal route was not in service due to a GO. Things, again, that not everybody needs to think about, but the system needs to think about. These are just amazing things, but Edith was tireless. Because of Edith, we have a much better MTA capital program. Accessibility is not an afterthought, it's included. The next capital program has at least 75 stations becoming accessible. When congestion pricing kicks in, there will be another pot of money which will make even more of the system accessible. All of these things are a wonderful tribute to Edith. We're certainly not going to stop fighting for accessibility just because Edith has left us. She will be sorely missed, but she reminds us of a very important fact. Our transit system works best when it works for everyone, and that's a fight that we will continue. So God bless you, Edith. We'll miss you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrew. Next we'll hear from Commissioner and Board Member Victor Khaleesi, who before he became a board member was my mentor as I served as the Chief Accessibility Specialist at New York City DOT. And I'll remember one thing Victor said to me when I first got there over 7 years ago. He said, there is one person you must listen to, pick up every phone call for, and that is Edith Prentice. If you want to be successful at this job, you must befriend Edith and listen to everything she says. Thank you so much for that advice, Commissioner, because you were spot on. She was a great friend and mentor, and I have you to thank for that. Victor Khaleesi.
Thank you, Quamel. Hello, everyone. Edith would love hearing that hum of the bus right there. It's just because she loved the buses just as much as she loved the subways. It's a horrible day today that we actually have to put this plaque up for Edith. I'm not sure what to say. I could write some things down, but I'd just be reading something. I remember the night that she passed and Arlene called me. It was one of the toughest things. Arlene happens to be one of her good friends, and Arlene actually did a movie on her as well, a documentary on her. And my heart fell out. And then I spoke to her brother, Andy, that night. And we had a conversation and helped the family out to get things in order. But as Andy and I talked, he was telling me about, he knew his sister was doing some good things, but didn't know the breadth of what she was doing. As Quamel said, Edith was a powerhouse. Or let me rephrase that. Edith is a powerhouse. We are all here and have and will continue to benefit from her advocacy. She gave me the ideas that I did to push our office forward. She's the one that pushed legislation. She's the one that cared about everyone in front of us right now. And not just one set of people with disabilities in wheelchairs. She cared about people who were deaf and hard of hearing. She cared about people who were blind and low vision. She cared about people with developmental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, mental health disabilities. And not only did she care about it, she advocated for it up and down the state of New York. And nobody knew an issue like Edith did. And I adored her. I miss her every day. I miss her advocacy. And what we're going to do without her and what we're doing without her is just not good enough. Last night we had our 31st anniversary of the ADA. And I challenged advocates to find their inner Edith and push everything that they can and look at policies, push government to do what they need to do. We need to push the MTA to do more. That's the reason why I took this board position. We need to push the city of New York to do more. And Edith helped get me into this position under this administration. We need to make sure federal government's doing their part. And we need to make sure that people understand what Edith has done. This plaque is just one bit of Edith. And I know that council members and borough presidents are thinking about other ways to honor her. And the best way to honor her is to remember her. And the best way to honor her is push forward and make sure that we make New York City the most accessible city in the world. I will miss Edith. I adore her. And I'm glad her family is here today. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I feel your pain. I feel your pain. Thank you, everyone. And find your inner Edith, and let's make the change we need to. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Commissioner Khaleesi. But as we heard from the Commissioner, Edith's job was really to keep us honest in government, to our word, to the promises that we make every day. She did that for me. But like Edith, there's so many other advocates that continue her fight, that continue her work. This event today is about that work. And to speak on behalf of all advocates in New York, we've invited Jessica Murray, who serves as the chair of ACTA, to speak. Thank you, Jessica.
I don't know if I can speak on behalf of all advocates, but I'll try my best. So I first met Edith at a Community Board 1 meeting in Manhattan in early 2018, where she was speaking out against residents who were trying to block an elevator project, citing concerns over an increased risk of terrorism. We met the next month at the Access Project when a former MTA board member wanted to meet with community members to talk about subway accessibility. We stayed after that meeting and chatted. I told her about a pilot study I was about to start, and she told me about her graduate studies in Florida. As a person with a non-visible and episodic disability who does disability research and advocacy, I'm sometimes viewed with suspicion or assumed to have a savior complex. If Edith ever questioned my motives, she never showed it. She brought me into her fold, sharing announcements to her Disability Network newsletter, inviting me to DIA meetings to recruit participants. Over the next 3 years, we exchanged hundreds of emails. And when it was easier to just have a conversation, or if she wanted an answer to something, she didn't hesitate to call me. If you knew Edith, you knew she was opinionated and outspoken. She didn't care for the message, elevators are for everyone, which is a campaign I created and was pretty proud of. When I asked her why, she made a vague threat of bodily harm to the non-disabled passengers who would dare to cut her off and take up all the room in the elevator before she could get in. She had a point, and from her perspective, I could see that she wanted access to the elevators that she fought so hard for. And I pitied the poor souls who crossed her and then put their feet in direct proximity of her wheelchair. We bonded over our shared goal of improving transit accessibility, and I always appreciated her insights, even though we had different approaches. It was an honor to know Edith and work with her on the advisory committee for transit accessibility for New York City Transit, one of many active roles that she held on transportation advisory boards and other boards in the city. Her visible presence in these campaigns was dwarfed by the work she did behind the scenes. She accompanied new or reticent wheelchair users on subway rides to show them the ropes and help them get over their fears. She was a mentor and a friend to me and countless disabled New Yorkers, many of whom know her and worked with her for much longer than I did, like Christopher Greif, Jessica De La Rosa, Dustin Jones, other people here today. Last year, for the 30th anniversary of the ADA, she helped organize an event about the MTA Arts for Transit program, a piece of the subway that she loved but didn't always have access to. She wanted the art to be available to everyone, including people who were blind or low vision, and those who couldn't physically visit the stations. Edith loved transit and fought for access for the community as much as for herself. To have a permanent reminder of her work at the station that she frequented is a fitting tribute. The advocates that she influenced, including me, know her true impact cannot be measured. We are all lucky to stand on the shoulders of a giant as we carry on with her unfinished work. We'll miss you, Edith.
Thank you so much, Jess. We will now be hearing from Borough President Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. You know, I only hear one voice when I wake up in the morning. And when I go to sleep, I don't hear my family. I hear Edith. I'm not kidding. You know, you both adore her. You knew she was brilliant. And you're scared shit of her at the same time. And what happens is, even, I know she loved the commissioner. She loved you. But I don't know who else she loved. So I was always afraid. Oh, she loves some of you, but not everybody. And so if I mentioned somebody, God forbid elected officials, I never mentioned them at all. But if I mentioned even somebody who was a leader, she loved Arlene, she loved her family, at least some of them. Not all of them, Andy, just so you know. But even in the disabled community, I was scared to death to name somebody because maybe she didn't like that person and then I'd be in trouble. So I was very careful. But, you know, she's usually right. She was also a leader, just an amazing leader. And she was head of, I'm sure, 504, DIA. I know we were always down at Visions on 23rd Street. And I loved it because she would shut people up who should be shut up. I loved every minute of it. I wish I could do that. You know, I was like, good, yay, Edith. But I thought, uh-oh, I'll never mention that person again in her presence. but the fact that she did so much for public transit, but she also did for everybody else, as you heard from the commissioner. She also, like I remember the doors at the entrance when it was first done, and I was in the council of the Time Warner Center, they were not accessible. I had such fun blasting the head of Time Warner, and they did fix the damn doors. Because of little things mattered to her. It wasn't just a big policy, but little things. Now, she was a great member of Community Board 12. We put her on, the council member and I put her on. I was very upset when she wanted to leave, but she was leaving no matter what. You couldn't convince her otherwise. But the whole time she was there, she gets frustrated correctly with policies that are not what they should be. We need that kind of frustration. We need that kind of leadership. That's the only way you make change. And when her brilliance and her fact that she worked 24 hours a day on things she cared about, there was no time that ended for her. I remember when Arlene called me and the commissioner to say that she had passed, you just felt like a whole human presence. It wasn't just one person had left us. And so we do have to carry on. And I know each and every one of you here, Edith, right now, I don't know what we're doing wrong and I don't know what we're doing right. But we will pay attention to whatever it is and we will follow up on everything that Edith cared about. Thank you very much.
No. Thank you so much, Gail. Next, we'll hear from Edith Rodriguez, who chairs the City Council Committee on Transportation, was a great friend of Edith, and also champions accessibility throughout the city. Edith.
Thank you, Kamal. I think that, first of all, Community Board 12 have lost great leaders in the last couple of years. From Obi Bean, from Richard Lewis, to Park North, to our Edith. Those were people with so much knowledge, with so much dedication that I know that the loss I feel in a community board every day in the city of New York. For me, it's a great honor to be here dedicating this elevator to Edith, but following what my colleagues have said, how do we celebrate? For me, it's about inviting everyone to continue embracing the fight to make transportation accessible to 1 million New Yorkers with physical challenges. It's not Victor, it's not Q, it's not those hundreds of thousands. They are speaking for individuals like myself and others that if we are so lucky to live long, at some point, we will need an elevator. We will need electrical stair in order to get into the bus, in order to get into the train. I think that the capital of the world has to have a plan to make all stations accessible. I feel that with the leadership with Pat Foy, Q Arroyo, Kemuel Arroyo, and others, we had to work with that goal. We had to continue bringing funding from the federal, the state, the city, the private sector to make every single station accessible. That's how I invite everyone to celebrate our Edith Princeton. I think that we can do it. I think that we should have as a goal. I think it is important to dedicate 177 station after 1 hour. We have the other station here, Dykeman and Nago, the one train that I know that Kemuel Arroyo, they're working to figure out how to dedicate it to, where Edith nannies, they are also present. And I would like, again, to invite not only the residents of my community, but all New Yorkers to always remember Edith. Creo que es importante nosotros celebrar a Edith con un compromiso de hacer la transportación asequible. Creo que la ciudad de Nueva York, que tiene 1 millón de personas que tienen desafíos físicos, que viven con algún nivel de disability, por ello y por nosotros, que en algún momento, si vivimos muchos años, necesitaríamos una escalera eléctrica, necesitaríamos un elevador, tenemos que trabajar con un plan para asegurarnos que cada una de las estaciones de los trenes de la ciudad de Nueva York sean asequibles. Thank you.
Gracias, Idanis, por esas palabras para nuestra amiga Edith, quien extrañamos bastante y hoy celebramos su memoria con esta dedicación de este elevador, un elevador que ella usaba con frecuencia. Y como dijo el concejal, estamos aquí celebrando los logros de Edith y la vida de Edith, pero no se nos olvida que la marcha no se acaba. Todos tenemos que trabajar para seguir elevando la accesibilidad en el sistema de transporte en todo Nueva York. I would like to take a second to acknowledge that we've been joined by friends from Al Taylor's office. Thank you so much for being here. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Helen Rosenthal for some words.
Hi, I'm City Council Member Helen Rosenthal. I was elected into office and started in 2014. I was 52 years old and thought I was smart. Meeting Edith and many others was a humbling experience. You know, thank goodness for Edward Friedman, who's here, who Victor Calisi suggested I take on as an intern. Because of Edward, I was able to write and pass half a dozen pieces of legislation to help the community with disabilities. Of course, every single bill had to go past Edith first, and Edith very wisely pointed out all the mistakes in the bill and why it didn't go far enough. And I was so grateful to know that I was learning from the best. So grateful that this legislation would be all that much better because Edith had her hands in it, right? I remember one in particular where we were struggling with the reality that people with disabilities can't get into public meetings. You can have a public hearing, but it's not accessible for everyone. And I remember Edith saying to me, I'm a member of Community Board, what is it, 10, 11? 12, sorry, I'm Southern Manhattan. Community Board 12, and they have these meetings. I go to the place, and I can't get in. I can't get in. So what's the point of me being on the community board if I can't get in? At which point, Edward drafted legislation that we passed saying that every single public city government event had to have identifying information of how that location was accessible and who to contact if your needs were not being met. We passed that legislation. I would ask the next city council to make sure that it's enforced. I'm going to end just with one little story that a moment that Edith and I shared when we were going through the parking lot at City Hall, and she was berating me about some piece of legislation that I agreed with her 100% on, of course. And then she looked up at me, and in all honesty, she said, Helen, you know, I can't control myself for berating you. I have a disability. To this day, I don't know, like, did she mean it or was she playing me? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So I commend the MTA for naming this station, putting this station in her name. But just to channel my inner Edith, I urge the MTA, Andrew, come out, to name every elevator after Edith Prentice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, council member. And I have to extend a huge thank you to council member Rosenthal for spearheading the policy that made it possible so that every agency in the city of New York now has a disability service facilitator. It was that policy that ensured that I wasn't the only one with Commissioner Khaleesi in city government leading that effort, and now so many others continue that fight. Thank you again for that. I want to take a second to acknowledge that we've been joined by representatives from Assemblymember Carmen de la Rosa, upcoming council member Carmen de la Rosa. So thank you so much for joining us. And it is my honor to introduce our next and last speaker, Robert Jackson, Senator Jackson, who is a good friend of mine. But beyond that, he's also someone who understands accessibility, particularly the fact that accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities. Like Edith used to fight for, accessibility includes our aging New Yorkers, our parents with strollers, tourists, and so many others who also have access needs. Thank you so much, Robert Jackson, for carrying that mission and leading in those efforts up here in Northern Manhattan.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone, and to her family. I just want to say and take 1 minute to say that Edith Prentice was a fighter. And she wouldn't fight you with her fist, but she would fight you with her tongue. And sometimes I see her in the neighborhood because we don't live too far from one another, and her Cadillac, I call it, she would like almost run you over. But you know, she was getting to go where she had to go, and that is the access behind us. And believe me, if you rented a place as an elected public official, even if it's a campaign or whatever, you would hear from her if it didn't meet the need. Let me just tell you that. Her involvement, not only as far as ADA accessibility, but her involvement in the Democratic club that she belonged to, 504 Democratic Club, the Audubon Reform Democratic Club. She was active in our community in every manner, shape, and form that I know of. And so with that, I just say to you, thank you for putting this together to honor Edith Prentice. And I'd like to take my last 20 seconds, a moment of peace. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Congressman Adriano Espaillat, who's also sent a representative to join us today for this event. Folks, thank you all so much for those kind words. We're truly honoring an incredible friend and advocate. And in her memory, we say, the fight is not over, we will carry on. Thank you, Edith. So I'd like to ask the family if we could join us at the elevator, and Lisa Daglian from PCAC to help with the unveiling of the plaque. Before we do so, I will read what the plaque says for some of us who aren't going to be up there. The plaque reads, "The MTA dedicated this elevator in memory of Edith Prentice on July 28, 2021. Edith's unwavering commitment to transit accessibility inspired us all to build a better system in Washington Heights and across New York State. The MTA honors her legacy through our ongoing work towards system-wide accessibility."
Stand by. Excuse me, please. Hang on. Lisa, hold on. Wait. Do you need this for anything?
Not a rush, okay. Everyone. We can wait. I know, we can wait. All right, everyone there? Just camera's clear? Is the camera clear?
Cue.
Okay, are we ready? 1, 2, Edith! Yay!
That's very nice.
Oops, no, don't present.
Let's hope the elevator works.
It does.
It works. You checked it?
Yes. Want to read it? For those of you who didn't hear earlier, I'll just read it again. The MTA dedicated its elevator in memory of Edith Prentice. 1952, 2021, on July 29, 2021. Edith's unwavering commitment to transit accessibility inspired us all to build a better system in Washington Heights and across New York State. The MTA honors her legacy through our ongoing work towards system-wide accessibility. Thank you all, and thank you for being here. Thank you. Good job. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.